Hello everyone, Alanah here. Just wanted to apologize before you listen to this episode for the terrible audio to begin with. Troy, it'll be obvious to anyone who's watching the video, but especially for our audio listeners, joined from an airport, and I guess his connection wasn't great, but I found the conversation so interesting that I felt like it should be included regardless. It just means the audio is pretty atrocious. Sorry about that, but as soon as he jumps off the call, it clears up, so if it drives you too nuts, you can just skip ahead a bit if you like. Enjoy the show. I can't ask the host to give me permission to record.
You are the host. No?
No host exists. It's very strange.
We are hostless.
We are hostless.
Is it not automatically going to record the audio anyway? Once you check that box, I think it stays checked.
Oh, maybe it will.
I'm so please delete everything we had a conversation about up to this point. The three of
Although
us
wait.
have perfect,
Although
the three of us have all destroyed our careers in the first 5 minutes of that recording. So please, we all suffer.
Oh my.
Hey, Troy.
Hello there.
What an entrance.
Looked like you were wearing a tie,
Look at
and I
this.
got real
Are those
excited.
real books or is that
Those are fake
those
books.
prints?
I've always known Troy was a fake. Yeah.
I always
Troy,
touch
if
my
you're
books
jealous
like
of my
that.
bookshelf, just admit to it. You do not have to
I-
descend to printing pictures of books.
You know what's sad is that's
Is that
literally the first thought.
champagne?
I was like, that is Prosecco.
You live in a different world to the rest of us.
He does. He
Also,
travels
your hair is
Okay.
in different
noticeably
circles.
under control.
Yeah, it is.
Why are we all being so cruel to Troy?
No, that was a
bad.
compliment. What are you talking about? What's cruel
That's
about
true.
that?
So I I have no idea what I'm interrupting. I'm going to barrel
Deep
through.
philosophical conversation.
Of course.
It's my favorite.
You're talking about actors and
Death
how
and
frustrating
God.
they can be. And,
Yes.
yeah.
Man, I kind of want to get into. There's so much stuff we get into as well, like the Starfire whole situation. There was IGN just tweeted out something that I normally don't take offense to much, but this one really got me.
IGN tweeted
The
a
King
tweet.
noise you hear is the other three of us searching for
Literally.
IGN's
IGN.
tweet.
It was literally IGN tweeted, "I hate Troy Baker." Like,
Yeah.
Which-
Yeah.
Troy
Usually
Baker,
I wouldn't take
overrated?
offense.
Question mark.
That one I liked and retweeted. That was
What was
It
it?
was-
They tweet a lot.
it
Oh my
was-
god.
this was actually Instagram, and they said
Oh.
that
I'll bet you're off.
fans answer why they're not buying Vanguard, and it's
Huh.
just a super it was like a Daily Mail grabby headline. Look at us, and it's like we interviewed like 500 people, and 59 of them said that they weren't buying it because they had other games to play. But I was like, that's damaging. And already
also,
look,
what's wrong
we
with
can-
that? What's wrong with that justification?
That's solid, yeah.
Also, is it not selling?
It's a false premise. Yeah, but what they're doing is they're going.
Oh, here we go. I found
It
it.
seems to me like what they were doing was, hey,
It's in
let's
the chat.
stir the pot on Activision Blizzard, and let's say how that is affecting the sales of, Vanguard, which just launched amidst this conspiracy, or not conspiracy, but the controversy, not conspiracy. And I
I
just
think the
feel like
accusation is there was a
better, man.
conspiracy, yes.
Well,
The
yeah,
accusation. The accusation.
It is to me. This is why I hate to use the meme phrase of shake my head at games quote games journalism, but it's like just if there's nothing new to talk about, there's a breadth of stuff that you can talk about before. It's like, hey, I did this art. I just replayed X game, or I just went back and watched this one movie. If you don't want to stay within the game space, go. Hey, I just want to talk about
write articles
this.
about the top 10 gaming podcasts. That's a far superior.
What is up
use
with
of-
that? I had no idea people were listening to this shit. I'm genuinely surprised by
Not
that. I
to not
was
to
like,
derail
what's
us
going
off
on?
Troy's point. I promise.
I looked it up because someone tweeted
no.
us, didn't they? It's true.
Yeah.
Well, that person was Alanah.
was
No,
gonna say,
it was tweeted at me before that.
And that's definitely how I
I saw
saw
it. I
it.
was like, hey,
So, Troy, I'm reading this, and
yeah.
genuinely, this is genuine. To me,
Yeah.
Mike Bithell, the reader, this is genuinely really interesting and useful information.
not a scientist.
Not a scientist. The Vanguard stuff
back,
is
fine.
genuinely...
Yeah.
That's genuinely interesting to me, because I obviously sell video games, so it's interesting to see a breakdown of how people would respond to the
So we've
question
got
of why they're not buying
34%
that.
However-
said they'd played too much Call of Duty lately. 14% said they were already happy with Warzone. Another 11% said they were specifically waiting for another game to play, some offering Battlefield and Halo as examples.
I genuinely find that data interesting.
Not doubting the body of the article, the body of the article, and Alanah, you pointed out this as well. You as the writer, correct me if I'm wrong. We could go to the tape too if we wanted to, but you as the writer do not choose your headline. That is an editorial thing. That is that editor comes in and chooses that headline.
No, I said the opposite.
Is that correct?
I always chose my headlines, but it is pretty frequently, like for the Daily Fix, there's a group of people. You can often like have a bunch of people bouncing back. It depends. It's not always the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the same headline as me, Troy? Call of Duty fans reveal why they aren't buying Vanguard. Do you think that's like an inflammatory?
I feel it's
headline?
inflammatory. I feel it's going, because automatically what it says is that Vanguard isn't selling. That it tacitly makes that indictment. It could say Vanguard sales have decreased over previous titles. Fans answer why. But to me, it goes, this is the reason why it's not selling. It's like, that's a false accusation. It's not selling. It is selling.
So I will say...
Well, it's selling less, though, right? It is selling less.
That's the thing. It's a huge qualifier. I don't know if it's selling.
Yeah, it's selling less.
We've got a couple of things about this so the data is actually from gamesindustry.biz. So what IGN did here is just pull something from Games Industry, which is like, okay, it is kind of bad journalism. I think what GI did is good journalism. They actually got statistics to something. But I will say the start of this article...
He's solid.
Yeah, the start of this article says, this year's regularly scheduled Call of Duty entry, Call of Duty Vanguard, doesn't appear to be doing as hot as previous Call of Duty games in terms of sales, is one of the worst leading sentences. What does that mean? Is it selling? Yeah. By what comparison?
Also, didn't the Cold War one wasn't that one of the best selling ones of recent years? Like, so
you're talking about Black Ops?
Black Ops, yeah, the Cold War Black Ops. Like, my understanding was that one did gangbusters, which would mean if it did poorly relative to that, it could still be selling massive amounts of units.
Okay, hang on.
So
and Modern Warfare sold really well. But like right now, I'm in this airport lounge. I'm on my way for another flight, and I could walk around to the 20 people that I could see and go, "Excuse me, are you buying Call of Duty Vanguard?" And I could get a data set from these people that. And I could say, no, of all the 100% of the people interviewed said they had no interest in buying Call of Duty Vanguard.
It's true. The sample
and lead with that headline.
The survey says 671.
That's not where they're deriving their headline from. They're not deriving their headline from the answers to the question. They're deriving their headline from the fact that it's not selling so well.
I feel like they are deriving. It seems to me that they're deriving their headline off of, how can we frame this article to be a little provocative?
I think I see what you're saying.
I just think it's really interesting.
I also find it interesting, and I don't take offense to this. I see what you're saying is that the article, you feel the headline is written with the intent of throwing negativity at Call of Duty from the jump. Yes. Right? It's like, it's not selling. Here's why. I understand. I understand what you're saying. Well, it looks like Call of Duty, this is only for the UK. That
10% said because Troy Baker's not in it.
And it was us. We were the three who made it.
We were the 10%.
Okay,
survey of 40 people.
I'm a little personally biased because my dear friend, someone who is like a sister to me, is in the game, and I have watched her systematically be in incredible games that, because of the completely irrelevant surrounding controversy, she hasn't been properly able to celebrate the fact that she is the lead in something, right? You got Uncharted 4, Last of Us 2, and now Vanguard. And she was just like, man, she's so proud of her work. She's proud of the game. She's proud to be a part of a prestigious enterprise and franchise. It's just like, and what I hate is that a lot of that comes not from real hard data of going, hey, listen, and to me it pulls focus from what the conversation should be, which is Activision Blizzard and the 100% shift in management that needs to happen there, and the fact that you have CEOs that won't step down, the fact that you need system-wide or industry-wide change. That's the real conversation. Talking about how, and again, I fully own that this is my perspective on this, but talking about how that is affecting Vanguard sales, to me, detracts from the real conversation.
You feel like it's like punching when they're down or whatever. I understand
To
that.
use another relevant term.
It does.
Can I ask a
look
broader question, actually, based on that? Because that's actually interesting. Sorry, Alanah, you were about to say
I
something.
just wanted to give the data that just for context, that Vanguard's launch in the UK are down 40% over last year's game. However, it's still the second biggest game of the year.
Sure.
That's what I mean. Like, didn't Black Ops do super
And also,
well?
the reason for that is GI.biz is a British-based website. Which, by the way, if anyone wants to read good, really interesting stuff about the games industry, it's a fantastic source.
I agree.
Some really good writing.
I just don't want to gloss past Troy's point about
question.
interviewing the people in the lounge, though, and then going 0% because they do say.
You're out on the street right now, Troy. Can you please just go ask somebody for the purpose?
Yeah, I mean, it says.
We're on a big report, Troy. Troy, before you do, can I ask you a question, Troy? Before that, because you triggered something interesting for me there. Do you, as an actor,
I want to spin off of that to Alanah, because I have a question as far as the data for that specific.
Browser tabs are open
Mike
and ready.
first.
Okay.
So, as an actor, do you feel personally kind of slighted or frustrated when the press talks negatively about the game you're in? Obviously, you care about the work you've done, but it seems I guess I'm surprised by sales, I guess, in particular, being like a thing that would frustrate someone who, by definition isn't directly kind of harmed by that. Is it just about raining on the parade, or is it kind of more than that?
When I was growing up, I have an older sister. She's 2.5 years older than me, and she was a loving sister. To this day, we have a great relationship, but she was also still my big sister, and she would pick on me whenever she wanted to, right?
Of course.
But I will never forget one time, Bill Horton was a guy that was in my grade, and he decided that was the day that he was going to beat me up after school. And he did it in the soccer fields that separated my elementary school from my sister's middle school. And my sister, I had not met her when I normally was, so she was walking over to see me, and she saw Bill Horton giving me a whooping. And my sister tore ass across that soccer field and threw that child off of me. And she literally screamed, "Get off my brother." The point is that she could do whatever she wanted to with me, but heaven help anyone if they fuck with me. And I feel the same way about the studios that I work with. You can say whatever you want.
It feels personal. Feels personal.
Totally fine. Yeah, but and to me, it is picking on people who, I have a voice. I can go on a podcast. I can go on
apparently people listen
whatever.
to it.
Apparently people listen to this. And I can retort, or I can quote use my platform. I can get on Twitter or whatever.
Me too.
I can somehow respond to what's being thrown at me. But the animator or someone who works at the studio who doesn't have that bullhorn there was a game that I was working on today. I can't get into, but I can say this. There's 4 sessions that I have to do that are devoted to simply breathing. And it is
wow.
And we're talking. I was like, guys, I can get this done in no time. And they're like, actually, this is going to be really hard. And there's just such attention to detail that are put into the games that nobody would think about. And that's the point. They're supposed to lay down, and they're supposed to be no wrinkle and smooth. But there's people that work super hard on just that one small thing. And so when someone goes, blah, because I want to have a headline that day, and it affects that person that does that job. You're damn right. I take that personally, and I do jump up and I go, first of all, you don't know what that person did for that job. So you can say whatever you want about my performance, but when you actually pick on somebody else, that's when you'll see me bristle up, and you'll see me become my big sister.
I understand.
Bitch,
you are being a big
saying.
brother to Laura is what's happening.
There's definitely that, because she's
an angel,
quite possibly the finest
wonderful
actor that we have working in this industry right now. I have a question for you, Alanah.
Yes.
So when it says that sales are down 40%, I don't know. Vanguard is how many platforms? Is that also last gen as well? Because if you have fewer people that have Xboxes or PlayStations, your sales are going to be down.
It says 40% over last year's game, which just means that no matter what, across the board, every platform, it is down 40%. But let's see what platforms it's available on.
I just feel like there's
it's
so
on
much
everything
that goes into interpreting that data,
It's interesting though, because if that were the case, you'd expect that to be a response, right? That's what's interesting about the survey. Not putting aside the article itself, it would be really interesting data. For example, if one of the answers was "I haven't got the new console yet," then that would be a really interesting data point. That doesn't surface in the answers though, which implies that's not a reason people would self-describe as not buying this game.
Although again, the article is
interestingly, 14% of players say they're just still busy playing the last Call of Duty and are very happy.
I actually think Warzone is probably a big contributing factor to that statistic. Is that they made something that people love so much.
Yeah.
But again,
that's why it's interesting. That's why the data's interesting.
It's less than 700 people at a PAX.
I know it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. But the sales do. The 40% down is interesting. And I would.
And also, I'd say a sample size of 500 is still a very interesting piece of feedback for a game developer.
So I would say
that's less people. That's more people than have play tested every game I've ever made.
Yeah,
and
but
I found playtest data really interesting.
I feel like if it's under 1,000, I would throw the data out the window. However, it is a hardcore audience because they did find them at a gaming convention.
That's true.
But also, PAX has a specific kind of flavor to it.
That's true.
That to me, is also very different. The average PAX crowd to me is different than the average.
They're not your Call of Duty gamers. That is true.
Like again,
that framing's interesting.
But it feels.
Troy coming in hard with the topic.
It would be like it's like if you ask people, their favorite Taylor Swift song at one of my concerts, there's probably gonna be some overlap. Let's face it, it's a 1-to-1 overlap.
Oh, but that doesn't mean you dismiss the data. It's an interesting framing that is really useful, but it doesn't mean the data's not interesting or not useful. That still tells me
potentially interesting, but questionable.
I actually think that this data is not that useful because of actually what Austin said, which is the audience of a PAX. Is not necessarily the audience who would play Call of Duty anyway. How do you verify that those people are playing it? But regardless, the 40% statistic, the 40% down in sales statistic does make me go, why? So I do want to know why. I do want to ask people why. I do want to find out how that has happened. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people being paid a lot of money at Activision to figure that out. Maybe they should, be spending more time firing Bobby Kotick. But anyway... everything
that only takes 5 to 10 people though. That's like it's a small number.
Mike, something you said I've taken to heart, where it's every feedback is usable, and that has really stuck with me. I feel like even if it was your game sucks, I'm like, okay, that's data. Now it has nothing, value. This to me is the transcendent truth. Yeah, it has value. The switch, the difference to me is, what do I do with that data? Do I completely course correct? Do I go, oh, one person said this sucks, but the data is still usable. And I think that is transcendent across everything, whether you're making games or anything. How much value does the external have to you? And what do you do with that? That's the real truth. So to use Austin's example, if someone you interviewed randomly, what's your favorite Taylor Swift song? They go, I kind of guess I haven't listened to this new record. No one's listening to the new Taylor Swift record. Is the same thing that I feel that IGN is doing with this. Of those people interviewed, that is a true statement. And technically, you are right.
So again, technically, you should be blaming games industry. They are the original source. IGN just re-reported it. It was GI that is the source for this, and their headline is why didn't people buy Call of Duty this year?
Point, though. That is to my point. IGN has the volition and they have the ability to go whether or not we're going to run with this. I don't blame the data. I don't blame the article that's written. What I do kind of whack my finger at a little bit is going, I'm going to create a headline and put it on social media because we're not in people's timelines enough. And that's what I feel. I could be wrong about it. I really genuinely wish that we could have the conversation with the person that was responsible for that single post, because that to me would be useful data. But I just feel like that speaks specifically to my point of what Mike said, as far as every feedback is useful, but what you do with it, I still have the opportunity to choose how I want to respond. I literally sat there, whether or not I was going to write a comment, and I wrote "do better." I was like, that doesn't sound like you. You don't do that. And then I was like, okay, I need to be more exhaustive. And then I went, I don't need to comment on this at all. I have the ability to just keep scrolling, not comment at all, or even better, put my phone down. So I guess that's my point. If there's a moral oral to the story.
Percentage of
And there's like
tweets
8
that should
people got
undergo
joke.
that evolutionary process where you write it and then you don't hit send and then you delete it. That's about 85% of all tweets.
I
should
mean, I would
probably
have
do
no
that process.
content if I applied that rigorous standard.
Mike, you more than anybody else I follow, you'll tweet something and then I'll see a reply or somebody else and the tweet's deleted. And I'm like, what did he say? Why does he keep deleting all these fucking tweets all the time?
I do usually acknowledge that I've deleted stuff.
Yeah,
so
I see you acknowledge that you deleted it.
If I tweet something that like comes across the wrong way or I think would hurt someone's feelings that doesn't need, basically if I feel like I'm not hitting the
doesn't need
target
it.
I want to hit.
Is that what you were about to say? Is that what you were
Say
about
again?
to say? Hurt somebody's feelings who doesn't need it?
Correct.
that
Yeah,
what I
I'll
just-
criticize.
Some of us need it. Some of us need it.
Some people really need to have their
I
feelings
was going
hurt.
to say, hit me
Some
again and
people
tell me you
really
love
do.
me.
You need your feelings hurt.
I try to be targeted. I try and make my decisions about what. If I'm not saying the thing I'm trying to say, then I'd rather not say it because I've certainly tripped up in the past where I've tried with right intentions to say something and I've misframed it. Can I raise one more fact about this article I thought was interesting?
I do need to get clarification on something too.
Does Troy need to go?
No, go ahead.
I need to go in like 2 minutes, but I want to know what Mike was going to say. No, make your point. I'm not going to leave on that. Are you kidding me?
So it doesn't change things. What's interesting is these percentages that are in the article, or at least on the GI.biz, are from the 284 people who previously bought Call of Duty.
That's what I was going to say.
So so it is an audience who are into Call of Duty who are answering these questions, which is interesting and goes some way to counteracting the kind of PAX audience effect that you're talking about. Not the whole way for sure, but it is interesting that
I feel like
that
that does equal that out. They
literally bought Call of Duty in
Yes.
like 1999.
It says in the last 5 years.
I know that.
It says in the last 5 years. So they did do that due diligence with this part.
Okay.
I don't find fault with the article. I think it's an interesting thing. It's like, hey, first of all, somebody took the opportunity to stop.
I'm not arguing with you, Troy. Like for sure, I'm not. I just thought that was an interesting bit of detail. Like, I'm not. I know the point you're making. It's cool.
Here is, to me, Mike, what you've proven is every time you see an article, don't just stop at I should not just stop at the headline. I should go deeper. Unless it's like a rabbit hole, like you won't believe these 10 celebrity, whatever. But
you could leave
the
those.
problem, I think, is
those pages are so much fun.
Headline. Yeah, we do have a headline culture, and most people will see the headline and they go, "Did you see that? Oh my God! That they're all of a sudden there's 50,000 people that are dead." And it's like, of what did you do any further thing? And we've kind of I feel that as a society we've kind of like abdicated the responsibility of our own research in lieu of just kind of ad hocing somebody else's opinion.
I feel very passionate about media literacy, that we should be encouraging people to understand how to read headlines and how to read articles correctly and get information correctly. It's such an issue.
Like the South Park.
I love you. Disagree with me, baby. I love that. Disagree with me. That is the purpose of discourse, and that is the purpose of all of this. I don't always want us, four of us, to agree on everything. I like it when we disagree because I get smarter. I learn something that I didn't. Every time somebody disagrees with me, it challenges my opinion or reaffirms something within me.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, Troy.
Fuck off, Mike.
I'm doing a good thing. I'm doing a kind thing. I'm helping you,
Trying to make you smarter, man.
We're hitting on a bad note. Now you got to deal with it. I love you.
Love you
All
too,
right,
Troy.
bye. Wow, that was some audio. I'm very sorry, everybody. The audio is what it was there.
I found myself trying to figure out if I needed to recreate that effect on a voice. I don't even know how I would do it.
I don't even know how he did that. It didn't sound like bad signal. It sounded like he was
like
in a
warble
train.
Almost.
It was terrible.
It was interesting.
Yeah. But it's fine. The intention there was he came in hot and I appreciate it. It was about video games. So that's a huge win for us.
That was good content. And apparently we're a popular video games. I genuinely didn't know the podcast was popular. That's kind of blown me away.
Yeah, we have about 80,000 listeners per episode.
No.
What I especially
I know.
What I especially love.
I mean, thank you, audience.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for being here.
You.
But at the same time, that's amazing to me. Fair enough.
Feels unfair.
All right.
What I especially enjoy amongst our dear listeners is when we actually talk about one thing, or we talk broadly about games the whole time, and we get these this isn't the shit I am here for kind of comments. How dare you stay on topic?
I feel like we have some good memes that nobody's noticed this, so I'm just going to call out my own joke. I'm following everyone on the podcast and also Greg Miller from the official Twitter account.
I've never noticed that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's totally Greg. Oh, it's very good.
I can picture you at like midnight, like giggling to yourself as you follow him.
I am one of those, yes.
But aren't we literally like on the top 10? Aren't we like only 1 or 2 below kind of funny? Isn't that the ultimate level of this joke, is to overtake kind of funny in terms of listeners? Isn't that like,
if we did, it would be kind of funny.
That's how Troy wins eventually.
Suspect
that's what that
I
is.
wouldn't know how to even compare us to what
The
they
gap
do.
might be insurmountable there, in fairness. Like, I imagine it's an exponential curve.
I think that we have very different sources of listeners.
I will do whatever it takes to win.
To be kind of funny.
I don't even have
We gotta do a Squid Games parody that completely misses the point of Squid Games. That's the way to win the
I
internet.
so was going to bring that up. I was really curious your thoughts on the like weird sort of mini internet scandal around this idea of
fascinating,
content
isn't it?
creators and the shitstorm of like, this took only 7 weeks to make and has a bigger audience just as fast. And like, it was like a hilariously sort of dismissal of the idea of, you know, piggybacking on a thing doesn't let you eliminate the time it took that original thing as part of your calculation of your
It
time
reminds me
horizon.
of the Threes thing. What was the game that ripped off Threes? Was it 1024? Or
I don't remember the name, but I know what you're talking about.
2048? You know
I
the
didn't
one.
know
yeah.
that. I know the
or,
game Threes,
or
but
Ridiculous
it's
Fishing,
just
Rami's game. Yeah.
I remember Rami has had lots of fun with like clones and
yeah.
yeah, I think they're Luftwaffe. What's the game called?
Luftwaffe.
Luftwaffe. Yeah, I remember that one had the same. It was like the App Store had like just clearly it's that game.
Well, I think
Games do it regularly. Yeah.
Tencent does it to its own games. Tencent on the App Store will take games made by another studio, but that they have funded or published, and copy them routinely in a way that I find very strange. They will. I think it's maybe so that it's like, well, if you leave Tencent, we have your fucking game anyway, because we remade it as well. I'm not
It's
really
also
sure.
interesting from a copyright. Like, copyright when it comes to game design is fascinating in the sense that it doesn't really work. Like, you can copyright if someone were to, you know, I mean, Squid Game, for example. The guy doing the YouTube version of Squid Game is legally an interesting ground because he's taking a lot of elements that are protectable from a copyright and legal perspective. With games, core mechanics, it's very hard, very expensive, and almost impossible to enforce to copyright.
That's why they do
anything in a
patents
game.
instead, right?
Yeah, because you can basically get around it that way, but then a patent is a very involved process. So like, it's outside of the possibilities of an indie. But like, there's not. It's one of the kind of the biggest risks for a game developer is like, if you come up with something innovative, there's not really a lot protecting you from another company coming along and duplicating the game bit. And the thing is, with games, the game bit is often the important bit. When when Fortnite was inspired by PUBG, they didn't use any assets from PUBG, they didn't use any artwork, they didn't copy anything that was copywritten, but they did definitely have some inspiration in their mechanics from things in that game, and there's no legal recourse there, and neither should there be.
That's what I'm saying. Is like I wouldn't.
I'm not attacking Epic or
No, I wouldn't want there to be.
But it's like
because
it's different. You know?
You'd be limiting game development if people were taking those ideas and copywriting them as well.
Exactly. Yeah, we all benefit from that.
Yeah.
We all benefit, and we've talked about that on the show as well. That kind of the GDC thing, the kind of the game developers. We love showing people how our magic tricks work, and that's why the industry moves at the pace it does. It's interesting with Squid Game because it feels like that's applying kind of the same logic. Because if an indie game came out tomorrow, and actually this happened, so a week ago, I think I retweeted it, like an indie game that is very obviously referencing Metal Gear Solid strongly. Like their sound design, their art, they are going to make a Metal Gear Solid game in everything but all the copyrighted bits of Metal Gear, right? And we kind of, as a games industry, we kind of celebrate that because that's fun to get back and it's fun to do that stuff. I think with TV and film, that's a bit more of a... That's not quite as explored an area. The kind of the clone movie is something that's not respected in the same way as it would be in the indie game space or in the game space in general. No one really bats an eyelid if someone comes out with something that's like another game, but adds something really cool to the mix.
Because they're all alike.
Films, I think we do.
Really, like all games have something in common. To give context to this, assuming that we've moved on from Call of Duty, It seems like we have. I feel like we covered that.
And so have 60% of the 40% of the audience.
Apparently.
60% of the audience.
So what we're talking about now comes from...
Sorry, that was too easy a joke, Austin. I know you were offended by it.
I like it.
It was dismissive.
Not at all.
I was just being cheeky. I was
Just being cheeky.
It worked.
It's Bants.
It's Bants. It's British that people. We're good at two things:
Bants.
colonization and cheeky jokes.
Pretty good tea, though. Which is also technically stolen. That's part of colonization. Disregard. So
if you go, there's a brilliant Eddie Izzard thing. There is literally nothing. Anything that is considered British is definitely not British. We stole everything. We're horrible people.
Crumpets.
I need to not do that again on this episode of the show.
So fucking woke, Mike. Jesus.
I know. I do. I break the comments. I'm sorry, everyone.
So what we've jumped into here, if anyone's missed the context, is Mr. Beast is a YouTuber who does a lot of stuff for charity. I think he generally mostly makes a lot of pretty wild, crazy content. And he made a video that is Squid Game in real life, where he spent several months recreating all of the sets of the original, brought in 456 people to compete to win $456,000, all of which was donated to charity. And it's virtually just like an exact copy of the actual Squid Game. It is Squid Game in real life, is what he has made. And it blew up on YouTube, just enormous views. And so I don't think Mr. Beast himself did anything wrong. All he said is 42 million views in a day. I remember when I'd be excited if a video broke 10 views. I'm literally living the life 13-year-old me would dream of every night, and I'm super grateful. Nice tweet.
That's cool.
And he did something that I think is kind of cool. The video is
someone
pretty
else,
cool.
right? Who held it up as
the person we're mad at is some. This is the fucking problem with Twitter, and I did it too. Is some random fucking dude with like no followers.
You don't have to retweet it. You do.
Why do we care? No, I didn't. At least I didn't quote tweet him. I just replied.
Their tweet is gone.
Their tweet is gone.
Went hunting. Yeah, they clearly got
that person
pretty dogpiled.
Never would have expected that. They maybe don't even have the literacy to know how people would take that when they don't have a following. What are we fucking doing? But anyway, it was a really fucking dumb tweet.
It was dumb, but I will also say, in the sense of they didn't deserve a dogpiling that if they deleted the tweet they invariably got a dogpiling, and they didn't deserve it from the standpoint that their tweet was stupid, but it actually wasn't malicious. It was celebrating the idea of a creator economy that you can...
Its crime was ignorance, which is why I didn't dunk on it, because I was like, this guy's just... He's not seeing the whole picture, but this doesn't seem like a bad person who's like...
No, he's not being mean at all. So the tweet...
A lot of people felt like it was an attack on artists.
Oh, no, that was fucking dumb. Shut up. Like, I mean... Okay, so the tweet it's from John Yoshua, Everyvow. Please don't go get mad at him. It says, Mr. Beast Squid Games video, 103 million views in 4 days. It took 7 weeks to make. Netflix's Squid Game series, 111 million views in 30 days. It took 10 years to make. More views, less time, fewer gatekeepers. That's the promise of the creator economy. So the part that I was like, okay, I don't know about that is the suggestion that Mr. Beast's Squid Game video only took 7 weeks to make, when in reality, because he literally copied sets and games one for one, he didn't have to do the creation part, which takes forever. So no, you have to add the 10 years onto that 7 weeks. His took 10 years and 7 weeks. Squid Game took 10 years. So technically Squid Game took less. But I mean, the stats are wild. Like, to see that video did get more views way faster than the original seems wild.
Also, I mean, Netflix is a subscriber service.
Yeah,
so there's a big factor operating there.
Yeah.
It's also about cumulative versus so Squid Game, the reason it was slower was it had to accumulate an audience, whereas the point when that YouTube video came out, there was an audience who already knew
It's
Squid
also
Game,
one of them's 25 minutes and one of them's a whole series. There's that
Yeah.
stuff I don't even feel like is worth getting into. Like, it definitely is a consistent trend, at least from the patterns that I've noticed. I'm sure
impressive.
Smarter people have better studies that if you piggyback off of a popular property and make YouTube content around it, it will do well. People like seeing
What's
spin-offs.
the thing we have to reference in this episode? Last week was Ghostbusters. What's the thing? Daredevil. I've seen all the YouTubers talking about Daredevil.
Really?
This week. Apparently, I think Daredevil's the thing that you reference. Put the thumbnail for this episode is this. In this episode, we talk about Daredevil. We'll do that. And then just let people get to this point in the podcast wondering how the hell we're going to get to Daredevil.
Every time.
That's it. Just a
I haven't even seen
picture of
people talk
Ben
about
Affleck as Daredevil.
Is that a thing? Why are people talking about Daredevil?
Like the 20-year-old Daredevil movie?
I guess because he's rumored to be in Spider-Man, isn't he?
Oh, I didn't know
That's
that.
true.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think there was a trailer. So usually,
Wouldn't they use the
too
Marvel?
much pop culture YouTube.
Wouldn't they use the Daredevil TV show? Daredevil.
Oh, they would. I'm saying we should use Ben Affleck just for fun. Why not?
That'll be great
It's
for the algorithms.
To
Here's
be
a
the
movie
guy
most
who
of you didn't know
optimistically finds
exists.
the interesting nugget of truth in every bad take, and to be that guy. I do think the thing that's interesting in that the tweet is highlighting that is correct and interesting is that once you've gone past the idea bit, which of course we all know is 95% of it, there is the actual execution of an idea has fundamentally changed. If you have an idea for a Netflix show versus if you have the exact same idea for a YouTube video, one of those is a lot easier to get executed on
Absolutely.
than the other.
The
right?
idea
That's
of-
interesting. That's the interesting
fewer
point there.
gatekeepers is 100% correct. You can just make something now. You don't have to have somebody else. You can make a film with an iPhone perfectly fine. And I think that that's awesome. That rules. And again, I actually like what Mr. Beast did. I think that this is a cool thing that, potentially also benefits Squid Game's creator in any case, because it'll bring more of his audience to that show. Like it repeatedly brings it into the news cycle. I think it's cool. I don't have any problem with even replicating it. Especially when you're donating all of the money to charity as well, is obviously helpful. I will say this shit on Twitter is driving me nuts, that anytime anyone does anything related to Squid Game, which a lot of people are doing right now, people keep going, oh, you're really missing the point of classism in Korea. They keep being like, you can have fun and play kid
Throwing
games.
a rich guy party.
Come on.
Throwing a rich guy party is a little bit missing the point of Squid Game. That
but they know the
That
point.
one was a bit obvious.
Oh, I didn't see
Do
Would
they?
someone have a party?
Was it
Chrissy Teigen.
it was Chrissy Teigen, wasn't it?
Oh, that's actually
a
kind of
celebrity
gross.
party.
Well, but that's because
missing
and
it
she
there. That's
also-
the only one I'm like, that misses
Well,
the
she
point
also
a little bit.
probably has a mansion and shit. But I'm talking about people who've just
Oh,
been
that's it. The
playing
photos
games.
are all of them in a mansion role playing.
No, I don't love that.
Yeah, it's kind of gross.
No,
yeah.
but the ones that I've seen are just people
But how
playing the games.
amazing if that was like performance art, if there was like there was a knowing meta layer to
That's
the
so
irony
generous.
of that. Like,
You're being so generous right now.
No, I'm definitely not suggesting that was. I'm saying, wouldn't it be amazing if that was like the chess move they were playing with society?
Yeah, fair play. But you're right, Alana,
would
because
love
if your
that.
argument is making money from Squid Game is missing the point of Squid Game, then Netflix missed the
Netflix is gonna make a
director
lot
and
of money
writer
from
of Squid
Squid
Game
Game.
missed the point of Squid Game.
No,
right?
and I think you can still make the
This is
point of
commercial art.
something and have fun with it. That's the point. It's like I keep seeing it for everything where someone talks about Squid Game is you missed the point of classism in Korea. Like, no, they know. We know what the fucking show is about. People are just having fun. Okay, shut up. Like, it's driving me nuts. Because it happens for every YouTube person who's just doing a fun thing in Minecraft at this point. People are like, classism. You don't know fucking anything about classism in Korea. Shut up. God, come on. But I feel like this one, I do think that, the video that he made is really fun. I think this dude who tweeted this, I think my reply was something like, I think what Mr. Beast did is really fun and cool, but I think it's absurd to say that it only took 7 weeks to make when it took even more. And that ties directly into everything that we were just talking about in reference to game development, which is that literally every game that comes out is a product of every game that came before it. And I often think about how interesting it's going to be when we don't have most game developers growing up on the same games. Directors. Because most of our directors are I don't know, probably 35 to 50 in that range.
That's how I feel today, yeah.
You're about
That's how I
35 to
feel today.
50.
I'm 35 to 50.
Everyone's played Ocarina of Time. And the amount of interviews that I've done where people have explicitly referenced Ocarina of Time goes from people at Double Fine to people at Platinum Games. Ocarina of Time. It's going to be really interesting when we don't have the same foundations of games in our directors and to see what references or inspirations are pulled in and how much games might change or lose certain shackles because we didn't all have the same history of these were the
I'm
games
super
we've played.
hyped. Yeah. I'm super hyped for when game directors haven't all just had a kid and are processing that. That's going to be an interesting moment for
There are a
video
lot
games.
of children. Have you
There's
thought about
a lot
it?
of children, like being a dad. That's kind of a thing, right? Yeah, I love that. I know, no offense to anyone who's done that.
Yeah,
There's
you directly attacked.
that vibe. If Troy was here, he would be pretty annoyed at me right now, and I apologize. But yeah, no, I think a diversity of experience and life is going to lead to cool, more varied games. It's interesting when you go back to like early film, because so many of the early pioneers of film were like magicians. So much of the very early filmmaking was basically like traditional magic tricks,
Who
just
made
kind
Citizen
of
Kane?
reinterpreted on film.
You guys should know.
Say again?
Citizen Kane.
The director, you mean?
Yeah.
Orson Welles?
Yeah. So I know that
Very much the Last of Us of movies.
So I remember reading, he said the reason that Citizen Kane did things differently was just because he was ignorant and didn't know any better. He was like, I just didn't know the rules, so I just did whatever I wanted. And then he just changed a bunch of shit because he didn't have the people who do exist who'll be in your ear and be like, you can't do that. You're not allowed to, that's not the way that you do it. So he just fucking made something. And I think that is definitely a cool part of the creator landscape of content
And it
creators.
goes in waves. It goes in waves, right? Like there's a really I've been reading some biography stuff of Spielberg, and like Spielberg and Lucas are from that first generation of film directors who were taught in school how to be film directors, and that's where a lot of their stuff kind of changed the game. And then, but then they become the establishment, and there's new punks, and there's this like cyclical thing that gaming. You're absolutely right. Games haven't really. They've built and built and built, but they've not really had the punk moment yet where, and they're also crucially, there isn't what, and this is something that I think does need to shift in the next 20 years. There's not the same degree of mobility within games as there are in movies. Your interesting indie film director is not going to get put in charge of the Marvel movie in the game space right now. That's not you're not going to get to go
direct the next Last of Us. Doesn't happen.
Yeah, no one's calling Phil Fish to direct the next Call of Duty. And that would be an interesting game. But like, there's no one. That's not a path that exists, and that means that people who become directors in AAA space, obviously, usually very, very talented, awesome people, but they are people who've grown in the same system, in the same kind of career path as their bosses.
Because you
don't have that broad range.
You can't necessarily direct a game.
I couldn't do it. I'm a super experienced director of indie games. I don't think I could go in and lead a AAA team.
Also,
make a game that wouldn't work.
The business structure.
I'd be terrible at it.
The business structure of the two industries is so wildly different from each other because like you look at someone like Neil Druckmann at Naughty Dog. He was there as a sort of more normal employee before he was the director of The Last of Us, or co-director, I suppose more accurately, for years, like, kind of making his way up, working on the prior Naughty Dog games, that kind of thing. Film is far more kind of like cobbling together this, Mission Impossible style, like you need your demolitions expert and you need your this and your that. And with the exception of like
that's why
Pixar,
so many movies are about putting a team together, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Pixar being one of the very few exceptions of like they've kind of got this little brain trust of like Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter and Brad Bird, where they would like work on scripts and be hatching several films over a long period of time, and it was a lot closer to a video game studio type. Like we all are we work for Pixar, we are essentially employees. Most film studios, Marvel obviously. Has like the Kevin Feige and the sort of there is a degree of staff, but they go looking for interesting people.
They bring the new blood in each time, don't they?
Yeah.
That's how they reinvigorate it. And you see the same thing happening with Star Wars now as well.
It's a real bummer that the games industry is like one of the industries that you see so many job listings that are like must have 5 years and ship 2 games.
It's because it's a software industry
really
that started
hard.
making creative content.
It's true.
It's fundamentally rooted forever. I think that so much of the draconian IP language that at least I face in my contracts, it's not necessary. They don't realize they don't realize that it will pose zero problems for their game if they don't own every thought I've ever had about music and utterance I've made about it. But they are, but you know,
I've been on both sides of that conversation so many times.
Yeah, and I don't
you're
begrudge
absolutely
them.
right. It's a real problem.
I don't begrudge them saying we need to own this outright. You know, it's part of it because their legal team is saying we need to. And there was, you know, there's probably like one random case that's a precedent, you know, here or there. Like everyone always talks about Alan Wake having bad music licensing and it getting pulled off of Steam because of it. Like, you know, but that's the 1 in a billion. And the reality is, you know, the contracts, we're here to help you, you know, like I, as a composer, I'm here to help you achieve your vision. And there are ideally multiple variables that we can play with in forming a contract to make it as mutually beneficial as possible. But because there's this inherited software industry, like I mean, the most extreme versions, you know, I don't know how true this still is, but I would think it's still true. I remember from software engineer friends of mine saying that, you know, at least in the old days, if not still, you go get a job like as an engineer on the Windows team at Microsoft. It's like even shit you make on your weekends, they automatically
I had to legally get the rights to Thomas Was Alone.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I can say that publicly. I can probably say that publicly. I had to literally like walk into the CFO of the company I was working at the time and just like basically ask him to give me the rights because they owned everything I come up with in my own time. Fortunately for me, they literally said to me like, this isn't going to be a game that does very well, so don't worry about it. You can have the rights to it. And I will forever be grateful to that guy. It
was basically the action figures George Lucas moment.
No, I had that at both IGN.
I mean, yes, but to a slightly lesser extent. It also ties in, Alanah, the thing you're saying about the experience thing also definitely ties into, was it last episode or a couple of episodes back when we were talking about like the lack of a middle class in the games industry? That essentially you're either very small and have no money, or you're very big and have all the money. And those are the two kinds of game developer who don't want to bring in a junior. Yeah. Because if you have no money, you want to just get like the experienced person who's going to be able to do the thing and get it done and out the door. And if you're a mega studio, you don't want to hire people who are just starting out. You want to get good people, and you can because you're having prestige.
I mean,
it used to be that we had this middle class that would kind of train people up and build up people, but that's kind of, there's less of that now. There's still obviously some of it, but there's less of it than there used to be.
I technically was hired as a junior. And if you thought about that in any other industry, I feel like it would be wild because my resume is studied writing at university for 4 years, professional writer for a decade, and paid a decade. That's been my job. Have worked on 6 games, and I'm a junior. Where in any other industry, and I like fully am happy to be that, that's all fine with me, but in any other industry, junior is like out of college. There's no way.
Yeah.
And like I also had to be very established in the industry and have a reputation and like have people have written the things I've published on websites that get millions of readers. It's just, that's so wild.
And that's not how it used to be. Like, to be clear, like there was, like when I came into the industry, I did walk straight out of college into a junior role, but that was at a point in time where
it got more competitive.
Say again.
Is it because it got more competitive?
It's what I said, that there's not enough studios with that on-ramp that the true junior, the kind of the junior you're talking about, there's no real place for them because there's a company, like my first job was at a company called Blitz in the UK, which you've definitely never heard of.
But everyone works there, right? Didn't like everyone work at Blitz?
It's a joke in the industry that if you ever run into someone with an English accent in the games industry, Blitz, they definitely got their first job at Blitz. But that's what I'm talking about. They got their first job at Blitz because Blitz made kind of what would be ungenerously called kind of shovelware, like the games that your mum got you for Christmas that you really didn't want. But it was an amazing training ground, and because the budgets were small, but there had to be 10 projects, so they had to keep bringing in talent, and then they didn't really pay as much as other companies, so people moved on very quickly, so they had to keep churning in new people. It was it was basically like a finishing school for game developers.
That's awesome, though.
And it served a real role. And yeah, if you run into anyone in the games industry over 30 who's got a British accent, they had their start there. And that's what, and I'm sure there were similar studios at that time in America, in Canada, in every major games development hub in the world. And those kind of died because they weren't cool enough to be the indies. and they weren't big enough to be the mega studios. So now getting your start is much more competitive because there's just less jobs, because like I said, people either need someone who can get it fixed right now and they don't want to risk getting someone who doesn't know what they're doing, and they don't have the infrastructure to like train someone up on the job, or they're Naughty Dog and they can get anyone they want.
Yeah.
Why would they go to people who are less experienced? So it's a kind of, unless they decide to be nice people and bring in people, and it's now an act of almost charity, whereas before it was kind of supported by the market. So it was more financially viable for companies to do it, which encouraged them obviously to do it. So it's a weird moment for games.
There's a woman on my team who I won't name because I worry that people would go get mad at her for this, though what I am saying is extremely positive. Who is not a gamer, does not really play games, does not have a knowledge of a lot of games. Me, not a gamer. And it's actually a breath of fresh air. Like
those people are so useful. They're so good on teams.
Is wonderful because it's like she doesn't know the rules, so she breaks them, and we're like, oh great. She doesn't know what gamers will like or dislike. She doesn't understand the YouTube culture. Like she doesn't know about any of it, and thus just like pitches. And it's so like valuable. It's like having someone who's unbiased. Yeah, it's super valuable. And I feel like you would see people argue on Twitter. No. You can't have a non-gamer. What is
this
that?
On my wall is by concept art. You won't be able to see it. It's like a sketch of Megatron.
It looks
from Transformers because I'm so cool. It's really cool. It's by one of my favorite kind of concept artists I've ever worked with, a guy called Martin Johnson, who, and I quote, hated video games because they're for fucking losers. But he worked as a concept artist in the games industry, and exactly what you're saying, he brought so many interesting like aesthetics and ideas in for the dweebs he was making games for that game developers like massively benefited from this guy being around, and game players will have had all these fresh experiences where it's like, wow, this doesn't look a thing like Alien or Star Wars. That's interesting.
Totally.
Was because of artists like this who are not part of the same nerd culture that
I don't think the woman I'm
referring
referring to is nerdy. She's watched TV shows I've never heard of and loves them, you know.
And
it's
to be honest,
really
that
helpful.
goes so far. That goes so far.
Totally.
So many ideas. Whenever you see, and it's hilarious to me whenever I see this, like often when you'll see like some viral tweet about like something really original in a game, you'll look at it and it'll be like, oh, they're just referencing like that movie that no one's watched who plays video games, or it's just like, it's this fashion idea that's from this, or it's a specific kind of art. And that's not to knock those people. It's brilliant that they found that angle. But like games benefit so much from that fresh blood, and it sucks that what you're saying is exactly true, that if you said the name of that person, there would be a kind of game, and none of whom listen to this show because all of you are awesome, but a kind of game, a kind of gamer who would go out and make, send nasty stuff, because how dare you
that
not
is
love
what
video
I
games
worry about, which
shame.
sucks because I'd love to give her credit because she's great, but I don't want to do that to her. But that's definitely a thing where it's like, I would argue that if I were in I am in a hiring position, but if I were in like a director position, that I would probably want mostly people who have worked in the games industry for a long time or are gamers on my team. But I think that having different backgrounds is extremely helpful. Like different backgrounds, 100%. Not even just in terms of literal diversity, in terms of like, she comes from TV. That rules. It means she doesn't have any of the like the rules that we have set in our minds, or the inspirations like the Ocarina of Time. Like she doesn't have any of that stuff, and I feel like it's just as valuable to the team as a lot of other kinds of diversity can be too.
It's funny, I'm always of two minds on this subject, because I get asked this all the time by composers who are trying to figure out their place in the world.
Do you think you could do your job if you weren't a gamer? I feel like yours is very different.
That's exactly the question I always get. Do I need to play games to pursue music in games? And I always say, look, for me personally, the path I've gone down, the way in which I've interacted with the teams I've worked with, the way in which my ideas tend to form on a given project is deeply interwoven with my experience as a player, and trying to and even the fact that as a teenager I flirted with abandoning music and becoming a game designer. Like I took C++ and was sure that was going to be my route for a couple of years, and then I obviously backed away from it. But I always kind of had that seed of, I like to try to look at the music from a design standpoint. In fact, a colleague of mine, Guy Whitmore, who now works for the audio production company Formosa, but was the audio director at PopCap for a while doing Peggle and stuff. he always refers to like, don't call yourself a video game composer, call yourself a music designer, and I always liked that a lot.
That's cool.
It belies the difference between scoring a film or a TV show, or writing an opera, or making a record, or any of the other ways a musician can use their skills.
Bizarrely, technically two different jobs in the games industry, but I feel like I could very easily call myself a narrative designer. Very easily.
And I think that's
pretty literal.
I think that. Yeah, like an experience designer, all those kinds of things to me are an interesting, like on one level it's just sort of semantic, but it also does show that you're not thinking purely in the way that a screenwriter would. So it's like, on the one hand, a deep fluency, like, when you look at someone like Hans Zimmer and you watch the way he talks about the films that he works on, he's basically a co-director of the film. He is so wired for the language of film and TV. He is so, to him, it is always about storytelling. It is never about the music. And there's just countless examples where you can see that in action. And you see it in his music. That's the funny thing. As much as his music has taken on this life of its own outside of what he does, and there's so many like kind of Zimmer-isms that get sort of almost, they become their own self-sustaining cliches. They're never born out of this, here's my hit tune that I'm going to hide in this score, but like is in reality just to sell records or whatever, because there are some composers that do have that kind of secret agenda. It's always in service of the film, no matter what it is. And so it's like, well, I always say, if I was a director and I was hiring a composer and I had two candidates in front of me, and one of them spoke my language with complete clarity and the other one seemed completely at odds, the odds of me choosing the latter seems very low, because this is someone who there's a certain amount of trust. There tends to be a lot of anxiety around music, because it's like, like the joke in the film world, especially, this is less true in the game space, I find, but in the film world, often, especially if they go to film school, they have experience writing, directing, editing, shooting, acting. The joke is typically, the reason they're so anxious about a composer is it's the only job that they can't do on some level themselves.
That's 100% my issue when it comes to working with composers. You've just summed up my.
Yeah,
I think I've even said that to you, like that it's.
I remember,
it's the least comfortable I am as a director,
and that's a common.
You can't really direct them. You can
on some level.
I think it's an area where I don't have taste, but it's exactly what Austin's saying. Is I can kind of draw, and I can kind of model, and I can kind of animate, and I can kind of code, but it's like it's the one discipline I have zero personal skill in, so I'm not.
That's interesting.
Not comfortable.
So it's why it's like that's why, and I empathize with it being like this kind of outlier, black sheep of a contributing discipline to a game, which is why all the more reason I would think, if I was talking to a composer that said, don't even think of me as a composer, think of me as a music designer. I want to talk about your systems. I want to talk about the way that you're tracking your game states, or blah, 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 blah. If they suddenly know, if they can speak your language instead of you having to speak theirs, it strikes me as eminently appealing. But there are countless examples of really interesting stuff happening when somebody says, I want somebody that's clueless about all of this. I mean, like an example of a couple years ago in the world of film, there was this movie Under the Skin followed, and then this movie Jackie with Natalie Portman, both scored by this young, I think she's British, I can't remember though. Let me look that up. I can't remember where she's from. Her name is Micah Levy.
I'm trying to remember her name.
Austin, do you know?
Her name is Micah Levy.
Of any composers of? No, sorry, I'll let you finish.
Well, she is English singer. She kind of made some ripples in the composer community when she was giving a Q&A after they screened Jackie. I think she ended up getting nominated for an Oscar for that score in the end. And she's someone who came from the world of sort of like quasi avant-garde pop music, and got plucked into film as someone who doesn't speak the language of cinema, and she overtly said, I like to write the music and ignore the film. The film is distracting. I want anything to do with the footage. It's kind of up to the director to decide if they like it or not. And all these self-identifying film composers in the Los Angeles audience were kind of like, who the fuck do you think you are, you know? And then it was like she laughed her way all the way to the Oscars for that. And so it's like
that's also kind of how game composition works in a lot of cases, right? That you're not composing the music to like footage of what the game is because the game isn't there yet, right? So often it is more hand in hand like that, right?
That is part of what, like, at one point in my life I might have been more sort of Puritan and would be the type that folds my arms and feels very cross with young Micah Levy over how dare she be different from the tried and true method of like analyzing every frame and blah blah. Now I realize, you know, there's no denying that the art benefits from from people tackling it different ways. And I always come back to this one moment. Like, here's why I said I'm kind of of two minds, because I love studying. I mean, I got a gazillion books on the art of game design, and that's no Bithell library, but
don't do my thing. Troy's got his poster stuck on the wall, but these are just my upstairs books.
It's true. That's true. That's just the podcast library.
You're fine. Those are the podcast library.
The thread that unites most of my books is that they're about these arts, and that's why I love doing this podcast, and it's why I like listening to other podcasts where they you know, like or Every Frame's a Painting YouTube channel and things like that, or Nerd Writer, and all these people that are analyzing, you know, storytelling and the craft of filmmaking, the craft of, you know, Game Maker's Toolkit, all these places where there's a constant way to sort of see what people think about this and how they and so I love that. But I'll never forget the thing that I always keep in check, and Alanah, I don't want to forget that you were bringing something up, so I'll just say that I remember I once went to a screening. I feel like I may have told this story here before, so forgive me, but I once went to a screening of a film that I was getting ready to score. They were showing kind of like their first viable cut to some people, some trusted friends, to just get some feedback on the edit. And this director friend of mine, who was the guy who had recommended me to the director of this film, so he came along as a friend to the director, and I hadn't written a note of music yet or anything for this. We were all watching it clean. And it's a good film. But I remember afterward, I was talking to my buddy who had recommended me for the job. In other words, the guy who was not the director of the film we just watched. And he goes, that guy, you know, referring to the director, he goes, he's clearly a really solid. He understands the mechanics of storytelling, and everything is kind of like almost too perfectly in the right place, because he said every line of dialogue sounds like it was written by someone whose knowledge of dialogue has come from a lifetime of only watching movies. It did not feel like, it didn't feel authentic. It felt like he grew up watching movies until one day he just started making his own. And there's no like intervening life to diversify the perspective. So if your diet is solely movies, you're going to just rehash
an interesting criticism.
The ones that have already been made.
Yeah.
And it's the same with music. I remember John Powell, the very celebrated film composer, you know, sometimes I've seen him do events where they say, what advice do you have for young composers? And he goes, stop listening to fucking film soundtracks all the time. Because it was like,
well-curated ignorance is
my writing definitely doesn't come from that. Do you write that way, Mike? I feel like if I write and I'm trying to pull inspiration for something, it is way easier for me to pull it from something in the real world. Something I care about, someone I know, something that happened to me, than from a game.
I write like a game designer, so I'm very mechanical. So this is actually where I'm at with the next script, is like I'll write out a script which is literally characters saying, I am angry at you. I do that too. I'll do all of that,
and then I fix it. I do that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but I don't pull any inspiration for characters from other characters unless I need to find their voice, and then I go, I'm thinking this actor in this thing, so that then you can see how.
Yeah, I tend to do that. I'll tend to like dreamcast it and do it that way, because I find if I try and go too natural, my stuff is often very kind of sci-fi or kind of arch, and it wouldn't make sense if a character sounded like my mate. It kind of does often need, but I'll usually do a dream casting. I'll usually go, okay, that guy's played by this actor, that woman's played by this woman, you know, and then I'll do it that way.
But where do you pull your characters from?
Reference. Where do I pull the characters themselves from? I honestly, because my stuff's kind of more thematic and story driven, I'd say. It's weird to analyze your own work, obviously, but like I think my characters usually come about as needed playing pieces for the story I'm telling
Interesting.
rather than it originating with the character. I think
Very
my
different.
characters tend to materialize because I need that kind of character rather than me going, I wonder what would happen to this kind of character, which is more mechanical maybe, but like, I don't know, it works for the kind of stories I want to be telling.
For sure, it
but
works for the kind of
it's-
games you make. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly, yeah.
Austin, my
But I'd
question...
be shit at writing a soap opera.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Have you ever written a
a
short story or anything? Because you couldn't do that with that.
No, I'd be terrible at it.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I'd be terrible at that. Yeah, I'd maybe try at some point, but I would definitely struggle the first time I tried to write like that.
I mean, you kind of did with the I'm blanking on the name of it all of a sudden.
The radio
play.
pandemic, your sort of pandemic radio play. Yeah.
But even that like is very structurally driven. Like the first thing I did on that was I worked out, okay, it's gonna be 6 episodes, so I want to hit this beat on this episode.
Wow,
and
you
that's gonna
write like
tie
a
to that,
producer.
and then I work backwards.
That's super interesting. Like, I would start with the character bio.
It's just how I think for me, from the game side, it's because so much of making video games is, and you know this, both of you, it's so much about writing a list and then doing all the things on the list, and that's like a lot of video game development is like.
I mean, especially the
scope
position that
management,
you're
basically.
in is as director as well means that you are required to think that way, I think. Which is a little bit different.
So story becomes similar in the sense of, okay, I have a budget to make 7 locations. So okay, so these 7 locations, what do I need to do, how do I get the most? Like I guess I write like a low budget filmmaker basically. I write like someone who's actually got like a set of rules because I'm a low budget game developer, right?
Rules
So
are fun
it
though
makes
too.
sense.
Austin, I
Yeah,
was going to
I like
ask,
it.
do you know of any composers in the games industry who aren't gamers? Like, yours is an exception in that I actually don't know if that would be possible. Because
Absolutely.
what you do is so many pieces. It's not just a song.
I've worked with 1 or 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not going to out anyone for the exact same reason you're not going to out anyone, but yeah, I've definitely worked with some people.
Well, there's some
downside.
composer. Yeah, there's composer colleagues of mine that I think wouldn't have any Well, I mean, here's a really plainly obvious example, but Gustavo Santaolalla, who did the music on The Last of Us 1 and 2, it's the only 2 games he's ever worked on, and he made abundantly clear that he was, he was very reliant on the guidance of both Neil and Naughty Dog and also the Sony Creative Services Group folks. And really, he was like, he said, we did a podcast together, and he was saying, he couldn't even really play the game to just see how it turned out. He literally was like with his sons. And now he's sort of an exception for a handful of reasons. Two-time Oscar-winning composer, film music and record producer. He's sort of a novelty in a way. But there are composers who are more stalwarts who I think play very little. I mean, a composer friend of mine who I don't think would mind my identifying him this way is Gary Scheinman, who did the BioShock franchise and a handful of other games. I don't think that he's sort of like not a gamer in this sense of like, oh, to help, like your concept art, like that's for losers kind of. He's not like that. I think it's just, to him, it just was never his thing, and it's also partly I think that he came up as a composer in TV for years and years. He even worked with Mike Post, the composer of like the A-Team and all these other millions of big 80s and 90s hits. Mike Post ran kind of like a composer collective. And Gary was, I think that was kind of one of his entry points. Sort of kind of to your Blitz thing, that there are a few sort of composer halfway houses that exist that are a good training ground. And Mike Post was one of those. The number of people who are kind of in the 40 to 60 age range who there's like a massive swath of composers of that age demographic would be like, oh yeah, Mike Post kind of gave me my shot, in the same way that a lot of the 30 to 50 composers now would say that about Hans Zimmer. So yeah, I don't think Gary is particularly much of a gamer. I don't think that he, plays them with much enthusiasm or like as a way. Like I would work all day on a game, and then if I feel like, okay, I got to go home and kind of unplug for a bit, like to then immediately start playing games is a completely viable use of my of my evening. But for those who start to see it as sort of work, it's not that. So yeah,
there's also a lot of shared responsibility, right? It's like you said, like the composer who's not so into games, they have, you know, more like a musical designer or something that's working with them technically, kind of handling that. I had it recently on one of our games. I was working with an animator who's a TV animator, but like, you know, for linear fiction,
linear television.
Linear television, yeah.
So basically, the only thing I didn't work on is Bandersnatch.
Exactly. So, but she was really interesting to work with because she didn't know any of the rules of like how game animation has to work. And, you know, fortunately I was around, there were others around who could kind of point her to what needed to be done, but she brought so many ideas to the table. It's exactly like you're saying, Alanah, because she didn't know you weren't meant to do those things in games. That's not how it's done, and produced amazing results as a result. So yeah, it's a weird, I think often it's, jobs are so shared and interrelated, and kind of there can be overlaps. You can kind of as a team accommodate someone who's maybe less technically skilled in the game specific stuff because they're bringing so much on a different line.
Yeah.
It's funny, you know, a lot of an interesting place that a cousin of this whole discussion manifests is that, especially in the realm of the kind of massive franchise AAA publishers, there is a little bit of a trend that irks composers in the game space, which is to go, and Gustavo is kind of emblematic of this, although to me he's a special case. But just because what he does is so
Hollywood, right?
It's the let's go spend a fortune hiring a highly visible so-called film composer. It's often sort of chalked up as a.
It's often Clint Mansell.
It's chalked up as a. It's chalked up as like a marketing thing, as if somebody would read like, "Oh, Danny Elfman did the music on this game. I will now buy it." Like the number of units that realistically would move. It's like I'm the only person that would ever buy a game.
If Danny Elfman, he's just going to reuse your Fable track on.
Well,
that's
funny, Austin, because I think you have that effect.
Yeah, you do. Like, definitely. I think I've even made that argument about you to someone.
I think you have the effect where people be like, oh, it's an Austin Wintory game? I'll play that.
Yeah, and that's useful as well internally, often when you're like trying to convince people.
Literal.
To say, oh yeah, it's marketing. Having Austin's
literal units have moved. I don't even want to say dozens.
I would.
But it's a prestige thing as well. It's the it's kind of the Annapurna effect. We talked about Annapurna, I think, a few episodes ago. Although, yeah, some interesting articles.
For me, it's Austin's taste. Like, I feel like games
prestige
you work on have virtually always been games that I've liked and fit like in a tone that I like. Like, I feel like if you have worked on a game, I'm usually going to be like, I'm going to like that game. Because Austin
the Ethan Hawke effect, right? It's like there's an actor, Ethan Hawke. I don't necessarily love Ethan Hawke as an actor, but I love his taste in scripts because any movie he's in, I can usually assume would be good. It's the same idea, right? You're relying on someone else's selection process. Yeah.
Well, the recent brush up with this that I had, because here's the thing: the reality of it is that a lot of the really, really big, like especially in a post Hans Zimmer world, where there's a lot of composers who are if you go and you slice the absolute top of the film and TV roster, as it were, there's a lot of folks. It's no secret that these composers are employing a small army of assistants and additional composers and engineers and things so that they can be in like 30 places at once. Because there are a few people, especially if you look at the biggest TV shows, you'll realize the composer is essentially managing a crop of people writing the music on those, and they're more of the director than the
Leonardo da Vinci approach, right?
Yeah,
to kind of have a slate of people,
and that's not everyone's like that. There are noteworthy examples of composers that have no interest in that model, myself included. I've asked for help when I found myself against the wall with a deadline or two projects slammed into each other in a way I wasn't able to account for in advance, and I've gotten help, and obviously that's always credited and blah blah blah. But there are composers who I resonate with very much in that same model, where if it has their name on it, they pretty much, if they didn't write every last little note of it, they certainly wrote 90% of every last. Where then there's others where you're like, they kind of help set the tone, and sort of get the thing pointed, get the car pointed the right way. I mean, Bear McCreary is a friend of mine. He once said, did an event together once where he got up on stage and basically said, when I'm offered a show, I will essentially score the pilot, and then that becomes the blueprint for my team, so that they can kind of understand what it needs to be, and then increasingly the goal is to...
Isn't that kind of what a pilot is for everybody? Like, sometimes the director of a pilot doesn't direct the whole show.
Again, if you know this,
that move a couple of times as
if you understand that, then yes. But the average person, I think, watching would see the composer's name and assume that they did every last little thing. And again, I don't take any umbrage with this. The reason I say all that, again, I have nothing but... I would never tell someone how to run their business or what to do, and a lot of composers, Bear included, who manage a team, are friends of mine and who I have nothing but respect for and genuine admiration of. The thing that becomes interesting is that there is, and this is, I will say, I mentioned Bear because I could do so confidently, and this is also what I'm about to say is not true of him. The reason why it can annoy people in the game, the people that are more kind of specifically in the game space, when a big fancy Hollywood composer gets hired to score a film, is because often they don't understand games, they don't care about games, so they don't really end up doing any of it. They just hand it to their team and go, here's the brief, this is what they wanted, because they're focusing on like that cool movie that they're actually excited about. And so what happens is the publisher pays a fortune to get the unnamed assistant and they're not even getting what they're paying for. So it's like, it's a very frustrating, and I say all this because I recently did I was asked to moderate a panel with Hildur Gudnadottir and Sam Slater. Hildur is sort of like had the most unbelievable run in the last couple of years, where she worked for Johan Johansson.
Those names are so specific to their countries of origin. It sounds like a Street Fighter matchup.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very, very British and very Icelandic. So Hildur, was kind of a recording artist and cellist, and was working with Johan Johansson, the composer who did the Denis Villeneuve first few films before he died, sadly, a couple of years ago. But because of her collaboration with him and contributing on Sicario, they made a Sicario sequel that they offered her, and then that put her on the map to score Chernobyl, for which she won an Emmy and a Grammy. And while she was winning, and while she was in the mid-award season for that, Joker comes out, which she also scored, and then won another Grammy and an Oscar and a BAFTA and a Golden Globe. And so she was like, everything that can be won was won in this like 18-month period. And she's one of these rigorously, I do one thing at a time, and I will not... Nothing is delegated. It's extremely personal in the way she plays most. She doesn't really write orchestral music, so she's just, she does. There's a bit of orchestra in Joker, for example, but most of what she does is like she'll play her cello in a weird way, and then she and Sam, who's the producer as well, will, they'll manipulate the sound and create something. If you listen to Chernobyl, it's highly manipulated sound, and they went to like a decommissioned nuclear reactor and banged on the walls and made a bunch of recordings.
Damn,
and yeah,
that's awesome.
So she's very much the real deal.
That soundtrack is phenomenal.
I've not seen it. I know I should.
She's very much the real deal, and so it was noteworthy that with like literally a week into her Oscar win and just seemingly conquering the world, she got offered by EA to score the new Battlefield 2042. So for the last 18 months, that's all she worked on. And when I listened to the score, and so it's like there's the knee jerk. Oh, here they go again. EA hiring some big fancy, like she wins an Oscar, and they can't not go after her. And so I did this panel with her, and I opened it all up by saying, I want you to know what you're stepping into culturally. There's going to be a lot of composers that are probably looking at you going, who does she think she is? And I said, I got to say, I was blown away by the score to Battlefield 2042.
It's dope. It's super cool.
It's fucking, she really is very good. And also it was clear that she and Sam, they spent a year and a half just extremely dialed in. The depth of it is, so it's one of those
so
that
the criticism does not apply to her.
Yes. And I was saying, you represent the ideal version of this story, where you have found success in one medium because you are just talented, and another medium said, ooh, your talent like, how cool for you to bring your novel, weird outsiderness who doesn't really speak games. I asked them, do you play games? Sam goes, the last game I played was Half-Life 1.
Game.
That's what I said.
Good game. I mean, if you're gonna
exactly
leave
what I
the
said.
theater after one thing,
That's exactly what I said. I go, you picked like a kind of encyclepedia type good version.
You got the foundation of all video games.
The last
to be
book
honest.
I read was like Don Quixote, so it's like, okay, not bad. So it was one of those where I said, you are a magnificent bucking of the trend, where this obviously wasn't just some assistant gig because you wanted a paycheck. This is a thing you poured everything you had into, and the results speak for itself. And hopefully it disarms, because I kind of walk in both worlds. So I don't like the automatic dismissal of the Hollywood crowd or the film crowd or the TV crowd, because there's a lot of brilliant composers.
But it's not like that is
space.
Always unfounded. I would agree that if they're hiring someone and that person isn't interested and they're like, team, that sucks. I feel like you're taking that away from somebody else at that point.
You're just, and it's like bad business. I feel like you're spending money on a thing.
But isn't that a gamble? How do you know if someone's going to do that or not? You wouldn't, right? When you're hiring them?
There's people where you could probably guess, but
reputations.
Or the interview process, you're maybe you test their enthusiasm. But I don't know if you're
not
interview
wrong.
composers.
You're not well at that for that kind of thing. They just make offers, anyway, it's one of those that I don't begrudge. People don't. Hollywood is an incredibly difficult place to become successful at, and to become successful at that level. So it's not like these are composers who are just, sort of random nobodies or something. Like, it's just an interesting little cultural thing that I back channel with plenty of friends in the game space. And anytime you see another one of these announcements of, XYZ famous film person is scoring a game, I just always see the reliable complaints about that. And sometimes I think, yeah, I get it. And other times I think you're being unfair. And like in the case of Battlefield, for example, like I would go to the mat in defense of Hilder and that score, and EA, Steve Schnurr, the executive at EA who does a lot of he's sort of the mastermind behind a lot of the composer hiring decisions across all EA titles.
They are consistently very good.
He's
sound design in general in EA games is surprisingly good.
Yeah, they put their money where their mouth is. Like Steve definitely loves to hire those kinds of folks. Like he has regularly hired Hans Zimmer and Lorne Balfe and a lot of these people very known for big things. But he has, I would defend him in his choices and especially on Battlefield, where I was just so blown away. So anyway, it's interesting. It's a thing that
that I would never know about if we didn't have this conversation. I would never have any concept of this.
It's all just a tangent off of my sort of thesis statement that probably got lost in there, was that I don't think that score suffered for the fact that she's not a gamer.
Yes.
I think that it actually maybe benefited, but if nothing else, it was non-contributing, and it's just her talent is what made it, her and Sam's talent is what made it a good
the answer to the
score.
question is yes, you can make a video game score if you don't play video games, but there is a chance that people won't do it right or won't care.
It's maybe an unnecessary filter, right? Like you're turning people away if you make that a criteria by which you're hiring.
I'm fundamentally opposed to gatekeeping. I would never tell someone, no, you can't, you shouldn't. But I just also can't imagine how I would if I weren't a gamer. So to me, it's sort of like this weird cognitive dissonance of, kind of like do as I say, not as I do kind of thing.
I feel like I'm much better at my job because of how many video games that I've played. And that was told to me in the hiring process that they considered it to be an asset. I'm so plugged in with video games. Feels to me like a benefit, but that means that I have weaknesses that other people on the team have to fill, which my coworkers do by not having the exact same background as me.
But then you're returning that favor by filling those gaps in their experience. I think for a director, there's an argument that you do need to play video games to be a director.
For sure you do. For sure.
I think that I'd be hard pressed to. I definitely know game directors who
a girlfriend
are
who's a
less
programmer
into
who
games.
doesn't play games. She's a fucking programmer who doesn't play games.
Well, she's not. She's
just
not
making them.
interacting with a game. She's writing code.
It's true.
It's a very different. Yeah.
And
if she has excellent game designers working with her who are worried about like how the systems she's coding work, then it works and it kind of comes.
She's been doing it for a long time. Never been a problem.
Yeah.
She doesn't
it is so funny because to me the inspiring people are like I love Penn Jillette, for example. Like if you ever watch his Fool Us show, where people it's like a American Idol of magicians, where the whole point is, can you sit in front of Penn and Teller and pull a trick and they don't know how you did it, and if so, you win the prize. And it's like the most amazing variation on the TV contest formula. And the thing that I love about it, so there's a lot to love. It's just such a wonderful show. But the thing that I love especially is that first off, I love that they love when the contestants actually do fool them. They delight in it. They're like, joyful. They're so excited that they got bested. But what's so cool is obviously Penn being the only one of the two of them that actually speaks, he is a walking encyclopedia of the whole history and medium of magic. And he'll like make a sentence, right? He'll go like, so that trick, am I right in saying that it was inspired by a rocket ship? And they'll be like, oh, he got it. Yeah, because and he'll be referring to some magician from like Sri Lanka from 1921. Like it's just one of those where he knows everything about it. And to me, I get a contact high from being people that are walking encyclopedias. It rules. Of that. So so it's like, is there a composer that is sort of better for the novelty they bring to it? Absolutely, for sure. There's innumerable examples. I mean, especially in film, Trent Reznor is a powerful contributor these days to film. The career he's had in the last 10 years. Yeah, he's great. And he was not a film composer by any stretch for the longest time. Now he's won 2 Oscars. So I got my I managed to track down a Social Network LP the other day, and I was very excited about it. So anyway, it's just one of those. I aspire to be much more in the Penn Jillette frame. I like people like that. I love like Spielberg, who speaks movies and down to every frame of his being. But you can be Penn Jillette about something other than games, right? In the game space, like you can be obsessed with, you don't need to necessarily be that level of encyclopedic about this specific craft you're in. You can actually bring but that is what I mean though. I'm saying I aspire, my goal is to like, I love learning everything I can about this art that I do, because I just love I don't do this job by mistake. I love this job, so I love to ravenously continue to consume. Like I remember one of the first interviews I ever did was with some nerdy. There's a website called soundtrack.net that has gone quiet, but it's not as big as it used to be. But 12 years ago, it was kind of like the site for any of this kind of stuff. And I remember they did an interview with me, and it was so clear from our interview that I was such a sort of fan and student of the discipline before I got into it, that they ran the headline of the interview, which to me is like still one of my favorite headlines ever that anyone has ever phrased about me, was a Soundtrack Nerd website that said, interview with Austin Wintory, he's one of us. And I just remember loving it. It was like, I wasn't some like academic composer or like cool guy who plays in a band. It was like, no, I'm like a lover of this world who just kind of like found a way to somehow make my own music. Yeah, that's awesome. Anyway, a bit of rambling, but happy for you.
I feel like we should wrap it up.
Yeah,
we done.
I mean, who are we even? Who are we?
Yeah, that's true.
Hello, everybody. Did we not intro last time? We did. It just got cut off because the YouTube version. Sorry about that, everybody. The YouTube version, or the video file is corrupted at the end, so the last 5 minutes of the YouTube version aren't there. They are on the audio version, but I couldn't think of a smart way to fix that, so I was like, I'll just send people to the audio version. Because if I were to just upload 5 minutes, I feel like it would be really, I don't know. It's like, whatever.
You could have done like the Beatles documentary, which everyone should watch on Disney Plus. We don't have time to talk about it, but oh my god, that's so good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Play With Us, and I will play some video game writer. That's Make Bethany's video game director. That's Austin Wintory. He's a video game composer / music designer.
Yes.
You did say also. I'll give you one sentence.
Oh, I was going to say, I saw people commenting for us to talk about Arcane, and I've started watching it, and I also would really like to talk about that.
Let's make that a project for next week. I'll try and watch it this weekend. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I should as well.
All right. Bye.
Bye.